Hello, and welcome to Nerds of the Old Republic, the podcast where we drink, well, anything and everything, and we talk about nerdy fiction. I'm Adam.
I'm Shaun.
And I'm Mike.
And we are here getting ready to talk about the 1995 cult classic, Ghost in the Shell. I hear it's a cult classic not just because of the android nudity, but we'll get to that, I suppose.
The cult classic is probably about the highest praise you can give it.
Yeah, I've got some stats on it that I was pulling up for notes, and It's interesting. But before we get to that, if you've never listened to the show before, besides partnering the media conversation with some sort of beverage, which I'm really looking forward to, got something very different that we've never done on the cast today, to the best of my knowledge, right? We've never done this.
We have not.
Don't think so.
No.
Actually, now that I think about it.
We found a brand new liquor.
Yeah.
And I know, right? We're running out of options now. But, also just want to say, since I seem a little distracted, the Bills game is on in the background. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit distracted.
Go Bills.
Yep, go Bills. We are absolutely running towards the playoffs.
Yes,
so.
The game does not matter at all for playoff seeding, but nevertheless, it's a Bills game we watch.
Yeah. And, I like seeing our fourth stringers get some field time, especially Joe Andreessen.
Oh, yeah, Buffalo Joe.
Get your time, man. Get your time. Get that roster spot. So, firstly, let's dive into our beverage then, which I was alluding to. This is totally new. And was this you, Shaun?
Shaun.
I roamed the halls of my local wine distributor looking for a Dornish Red or an Arbor Gold for our previous cast, and then realized, well, Adam's already got that one covered with ale.
Yeah, I went for the easy brown ale.
And which is delicious, by the way.
It was.
And I decided once I walked past a certain section to go, wait a minute, that looks Japanese. That is Japanese. That'll work. And I know we've done Asian and more specifically Japanese works before on the cast, but I don't think we've, like you mentioned, I thought we did, but I guess not. We've never done a sake. So I got the cheapest sake I could find in Buffalo.
That is totally fine.
It's imported.
Yeah, I mean,
right on the bottle.
I would be stunned if there was a sake distillery in the area.
And I will not be able to tell you the difference between quality and cheap sake. So
I'm going to keep the bottle to show my daughter who is like learning Japanese, but it says Junmai Sake Fuki, which looks kind of like Fuki. It's the finest Japanese sake, 100% produced and bottled in Japan. And alcohol by volume, 16%.
All right.
Okay, it's a fortified wine.
Pour us a pint.
It will drink to you. Let me just see. There are some tasting notes, bitches. So you ready for this?
Yes.
Should I do it in my most racist Japanese accent?
Please no. We don't have any listeners in Japan, but that doesn't make it better.
Fukusaki! Fukisaki is produced by cold fermentation. I sound like Mr. Sulu. Hang on.
You do.
That was not intentional.
Damn it, Jim. I'm a
promise.
doctor.
Fukisake is produced by cold fermentation and made solely from sun-nurtured rice and spring water. We remove the rice's outer husk, or polish it, so that it is crystal clear and has an extra smooth taste. Try our premium Fukisake, served warm in traditional style, chilled, on the rocks, or in cocktails. Product of Japan.
You know what that kind of reminds me of is Bill Murray, again, friend of the cast, in Lost in Translation. He's doing that, I think it's like a Japanese whiskey that he's like schlepping for, and he clearly doesn't want to.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah,
and he's like sitting on a leather ottoman or some shit like that, basically doing the same thing, clearly with a voice or a face that says, I don't want to be fucking here.
Yep.
But
what I love is that those weren't even tasting notes, really, as much as it was like the process of making the beverage.
The explanation of the beverage.
And can one tell me, if it's not sun nurtured, what is the other? Is it like hydroponic rice? Grow rice hydroponically?
I guess you could do it with your grow light and your, in your superintendent's closet. Or something.
That got real.
I've got other things using my grow lights right now.
They got very technical in that. They're like, first you remove the outer husk of the rice.
It's produced and bottled by Godo Sushai Company Limited, Japan. Imported by Sazerac Company Incorporated, Matari, Louisiana. Sazerac. All right, anyway, let's do this.
All right.
Finest of the fun.
Love that cork sound.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at
That's the
that.
finest sake is from screw tops.
I have to compliment Mike on his little clay jars that we're using again.
Yes.
These things are fantastic.
Best.
Yeah.
A barware.
I looked on Google. I'm like, how does one serve sake? And it said small glasses, and I clicked images, and many of the small glasses were clay. And I was like, well, fuck, I have that shit.
Use the tequila glass.
That's right.
We are drinking it chilled, which was one of the options on the back of the bottle.
I have had sake warm. Actually, the most sake I've had is when I go to a hibachi restaurant and they spray it in your mouth. So that's not really.
Oh, yes.
That's not the same.
No.
Well, I got a spray bottle if you guys want to do it.
You have to call me sake daddy, though, because that's what they always say.
All right, guys. Well, shall we?
Yes. Let's do.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's sake.
That's better than the stuff in the hibachi restaurant.
Well, that's cooking sake. This is sipping sake.
This is real sake with the outer husk removed.
Yes, it's
Well, I think
polished.
That's the difference right there.
Right.
Actually, though, like I don't mind this. Like,
No, this is. Go ahead.
Smooth.
Yeah, it's not bad. I have had sake before, but it was like 15 or 18 years ago. And also, I was going to say, this is not as chilled as I expected it to be after an hour of sitting on ice. I wonder if the bottom of the bottle, the way I have it set up there is like very chilled. And then what we're drinking is
fine.
Yeah, it's cooler than room temp.
It said it could be served this way. So this is perfectly valid.
I am really enjoying drinking out of this like little Winnie the Pooh honey pot.
I do love that.
It's fantastic.
I bought these. I think I said this last time we used them on the cast, but we went to Portland, Maine, and everyone's like, you got to go to this Mexican restaurant there. And we're like, really, in Portland, Maine? It seemed like such a random suggestion.
Yeah.
And then we walked by it because it wasn't far from where we were staying. And from the outside, it looks like this tiny little Mexican restaurant. And we're like, damn, the food must be really good there if everyone's recommending it. So we're like, whatever. So we go in. And it's huge, right? It's deceptive because like Maine is like, it's like on the bay there. And so like the ground falls away and the restaurant's built like down that, right? So it just opens up and it becomes huge. And then you go out the back and there's these massive like patios that go out overlooking the water. Gorgeous, right? So we had already eaten, so we didn't get any food, but I ordered, they had a mezcal flight option. Yeah. And I'm like, fucking give me that. They're like, which ones do you want? I'm like, give me the smokiest ones you have, and they brought it out and they served them in these like little terracotta clay, but they were like flat, almost like more of a bowl than this. So anyways, I was like on Amazon at the same time as I was like, these are so fucking cool. I got to get these. Yeah. I'm on Amazon. I couldn't find the bowl kind, but I found these and I ordered them. And then I was reminded that I had ordered them when they showed up at the house.
I love that. When I like buzzed Amazon buy something and then on Saturday, which is our Amazon day, I'm like, oh, hey.
Yeah, that's right. Which vinyl record did I buy when I was in my cups the other night?
I know I called it like a Winnie the Pooh honey pot, but it's also more of like an Egyptian vessel for like your eyeballs to go into the afterlife with you.
Yeah, my liver is going to go on this one.
That's a small ass liver, man.
Well, it's gotten very little left.
Also, eyeballs are bigger than you think. You could probably get one eyeball in this, though.
Yeah.
I'm going to not ask how you know that.
This is where my tapeworm
is
for the afterlife.
There you go.
I can tell you how I know that. Because my father told us this story many, many times when we were children, because I guess that's just what my father thought was a good story to tell your children. But before he became a police officer, he worked on an ambulance. And I think a person had died or something like that. And he said he actually saw like the eyeball had to be removed for some reason, for something they were doing. And he said he never forgot how she was shocked how big it actually was, because it actually is like,
feel your own little socket. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So
it's
anyways,
your brain that's exposed to the world.
Little 6-year-old Mike never forgot that story.
Yeah, I got more sake.
Yeah, it taught me off before we start talking about it here.
Actually, I really do like the sake.
Me too, man.
I was like, I don't mind it. I really like it.
Speaking of eyeballs and parts of human bodies, let's get into Ghost in a Shell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ghost in the Shell.
So I will readily admit that I was an anime nerd in high school / still am. And I was absolutely aware of this series, but I never watched it. So this was a brand new watch for me, even though I'd watched, like, I mentioned Cowboy Bebop and a lot of the Adult Swim is pretty much where I saw any anime, which was, Cartoon Network's late night programming. where they put whatever violent sort of mostly nude sort of thing. And
I
will readily admit that the hentai eyes and the nudity is what drew 16-year-old Adam to that. But I stayed for the stories eventually. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. I read it for the stories.
Sure.
Well, I mean, that's what happens with any kind of, like, I wonder if he eventually does fix the cable,
Yeah. Does that pipe? But did you guys have any, like, is this a watch? Is this a rewatch for you guys?
I was the person who suggested it. Why?
Well, we already know where you stand.
Yeah, I remember knowing of it. I remember watching isolated parts of it here and there, and never watching the whole thing straight through. I think the part that I saw was when she's attacking the tank at the end, and me going like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah,
and like being like drawn to it, but then never actually following up on watching it, but being aware of it. And this was my opportunity to finally like cross that off and say like, okay, I've seen one of the most influential animes of all time.
Between this and Akira, we've taken care of both of them.
I think those are the two big pillars, right, of mainstream anime. And yeah, that was where I was with it. And I've never seen the live action or any other stuff. Like this was,
from what I've seen, you shouldn't.
Yeah,
from what I've heard, you shouldn't.
Even Scarlett Johansson can't save that turd.
I have very little to zero experience with anime.
Which is kind of interesting because you're the cyberpunk guy. Like you brought Stevenson to the cast for us.
Yeah, I mean, and Gibson I've read a couple of times, and I don't know, I'm a big fan of The Matrix, if you want to call that cyberpunk or whatever. I love the aesthetic of it, but I've never, like, it's just not, it wasn't something, I guess I'm kind of late in life nerd. And anime was something like as an adult, I wasn't ever going to just go back to and decide to get into as an adult, which is probably why I missed the boat on a lot of that stuff. But I'll say about this, I think if I remember correctly, these were my exact same thoughts that I had for Akira, which is I loved certain aspects of it. I did not love the story at all because I could barely understand it.
Not the only one.
And for me, I wish I would have watched it in the original Japanese with subtitles, because for me, like, the English translation or narration or whatever just is jarring. It doesn't work. Right from the beginning when he's like, "I demand diplomatic immunity," and it's like that's not how people talk. That's so fucking weird. I think
not even like an aesthetic choice. You can tell,
right? And I think it's probably an aspect that the more of it you watch, you get used to it and you don't notice it. But when it's not your normal, viewing experience, it's very jarring. Yeah. And so I didn't dig that. And I didn't dig, like I said, the plot was so fucking convoluted and shit. It was like diplomats and corporations and all this fucking shit. And I'm like, dude, I like my literature complex, but like, slow down. Let me like figure out what the fuck is happening here.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, there were many things that I did like about it, though. I mean, it's one of the things I liked about Akira. I liked about this too is like the very urban noir-esque feel to it. And it's dark. Like most of it takes place at night. Like I honestly, I thought the soundtrack to this was fucking awesome, man. There were so many parts where I was watching, I was just like, the music's really cool.
You like that weird Godzilla background music, or like?
Yeah, well, there was some moment, but it wasn't as bad as Akira.
True.
Right? Akira was like, there was a moment where I remember staring at that like man-child baby.
Yes.
And that screechy sort of like thing was happening for probably 15 seconds. At least Ghost in the Shell had much more orchestrated soundtrack.
It did. And it also had, there were moments where like there was no music. It was just percussion, and the percussion was very cool. Like right after the part you're talking about, it settles into like her waking up in her apartment or whatever. And it happens slowly, and she gets up and looks out the window and walks across the apartment. And it's literally just like a drum beat in the background. That's very cool.
One of the few scenes where she's got a top.
Very few scenes. Yeah. So I mean, I thought the soundtrack was great. I loved the whole like nighttime in the city, like noir-esque aspect of it. There were a lot of times where I just thought what I was looking at was very cool. Like they go through all these like abandoned buildings and like, city landscapes and stuff. I was like, in terms of just like the visuals on screen, I thought it was very cool. So, I mean, I had mixed feelings about it. I will not sit here and tell you that like I loved it and I think it's a classic, or I understand why it is a classic, but I didn't hate it either.
Yeah. And so all of those things are kind of the reception you see if you go back and like look at how it was received. So debuted in 95, why it didn't like tank at the box office, because it was like a traditional theater release, but it wasn't like they recouped their money and that's probably all they did, maybe a little bit more. It wasn't until the direct to home, so Blockbuster essentially made it, because that's when people started watching it and like rewatching it, and it became a cult classic in that way. Well, I guess that's how most cult classics happen, right? Like they don't happen at the theater, they happen at home. So much so that it was nominated for 7 worldwide animation awards and won 5 of the 7 that it was nominated for.
I can see the aesthetic, artistic merit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of beautiful scenes. There's a lot of weird ones, but there's also a lot of real pretty stuff. But it's like Mike was saying, the storyline is, I don't even know if listening to it in the original Japanese and reading subtitles would have changed the fact that it's extremely, I don't even want to say convoluted because that's even giving it too much. Like half-baked, I think would be the better way to put it.
That's sometimes, yeah.
Right. And they're trying to use this political intrigue and all this to basically get to the idea that, no, it's an existential story about what is a soul.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
Which is where I was going to get to it after we talk about the plot.
Sorry, I jumped,
you're fine.
jumped the gun there. But
we're on the same page.
It's essentially the same thing. It's like it's not the most well-written thing. The voice acting on the English version was pretty terrible. But the animation, except for the parts where I kept noticing, like, oh, they're saving money by just having a still frame here and maybe a little hair blow in the breeze. Oh, the character Major never blinks. Did you notice that?
Well, she's an android.
Well, but that's the thing that's really unsettling. One time she closes her eyelids there once when she's looking over to the side, and that's it. In the entire movie, she never blinks, and it just makes the whole thing so like, what? It's like creepypasta. Like, what the fuck am I looking at? And that horrible haircut. And just like, she's like androgynous, but she's got great set of tits. I mean, like, just the whole thing was just, and then, okay, let me ask you this. She's got this thermo skin or whatever that makes her invisible, right?
Which I thought was dope. Like, it's cool. It refracted light.
It's like
so
the Predator.
Outline,
it's Predator. Super cool. But then she's got guns in like stockings because all anime characters wear like thigh highs. Those go invisible too, and she has to take everything else off.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Completely naked, except for these cool things that make her look like some kind of like dominatrix.
Right.
Well, thanks for blowing that up.
But wouldn't you? I thought about that too. Like, wouldn't the stockings and the guns be like floating in air? Maybe I don't understand the technology here, but
no, it's the aesthetic.
So, 2 things. One, you're right, because there is a character in the first 10 minutes who has the same technology, and that's when they're like, oh shit, there's some real problem going on here that someone's got this other technology. But they had a cloak on. They had like an entire cloak and hood.
Right.
And that gun floated.
Yeah.
So you're right, there's a plot hole there.
Right.
Sure.
She just looks cooler that way.
She just looks way cooler with her chest out.
I agreed.
But so just to kind of close the circle for a sec. So it won Best Animated Feature. No, I'm sorry. These are the Annie Awards it was nominated for. So the Annie Awards are like the worldwide animation. Nominated for Best Animated, nominated for Best Directing, nominated for Best Production Design, nominated for Best Writing.
Oh, must have been a thin year.
Nominated for Best Producing.
What did it win? Anything?
96 nominee, the Catalonian International Film Festival for Best Film. Fantasporto winner, International Fantasy Film, International Fantasy Film. Best Film and Special Mention in a different category. The Gerendemer Film Festival, Special Mention. World Animation Collection winner, Best Theatrical Feature, Best Director of an Animated for a Theatrical Film, Feature Film winner, Yokohama Film Festival, Best Screenplay. So it won some international awards, but it did not win any Annies that it was nominated for.
Okay.
But yeah.
It's interesting though that, like you said, it had a mixed theatrical reaction and was nominated for a bunch of awards, and yet this is considered one of the seminal works of anime.
Yeah, it's right up there with Akira, and I got the same vibe. So, like, ostensibly, it's just a cyborg policewoman and her partner looking to hunt down a hacker who's taking over other cyborgs.
Right.
Or actually other internet, though they didn't use that word, internet-connected things, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that the hacker called the Puppet Master takes over. That, on the face of it, sounds very straightforward and easy to follow.
Right.
But I absolutely struggled, like Mike said, to follow a lot of it.
I think it was the presentation for me. Like you said, convoluted does it too much credit because that makes it seem like there's actually, like describing, I don't know, Inception or something, right? Like where it's like there actually is a lot to unpack there. This, it seems like at the heart of it is actually probably a simple story. But like, it's the way it was presented. And maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I was watching it. I don't know. But they would just be like, oh, this diplomat and he's trying to get out, but they want to stop him in District 6. And well, you know what I mean? It's just like, whoa, like too many like, organizations and people and motivations all being thrown into like a couple sentences of dialogue.
The whole point is basically the idea that a soul isn't necessarily only belonging to a human being. Right. And they just wanted to tell that story, and that was it.
It's a fascinating theme, by the way. And anything that gets into like those kinds of questions, existential questions, where like, they kept talking in this movie about how like, well, isn't memory really what defines you? And then what happens if you can like fuck with those memories and things like that. But then that also led me, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. You can stop me if I am, but like, I felt like the ending was very unsatisfying because it was sort of like at the end, it didn't really answer any of those questions or anything. It just was like, well, you could become a new thing. And she's like, all right, that sounds great. And like the movie ended, like,
well, there was no acceptance. Like they got sniped.
Right.
And then you find out, oh, he put her in a schoolgirl body,
right,
which is really troubling in itself. But I guess it's a child of the two merged beings. She's not the same. She's not the major anymore. Not the puppet master. It's the major master. Or whatever.
I think that's probably what they were going for. Is the
major master?
They don't give it a name, do they?
No.
The symbolism of youth is probably why they went with that imagery.
But we all know what that was really about.
Yeah. We but at the same time, we all know that anime had.
But I was just unsatisfied with how they got there because it was like literally the puppet master is like, well, if she's like, why would I let you do this? And he's like, well, then you'll just be the same thing you always were. And she's like, great point. And then she wakes up in like a new body and she's like a new thing. And it's like, that's just bad writing.
And that character motivation I thought was very thin because on that boat, which came out of nowhere.
Right.
The major has that like weird philosophical thing about like, what is the nature of a soul? Blah, blah, blah. And like, okay, so I get the person's driven maybe by that, but it's not really clear. And then I have to merge with this thing. I have to dive in to the point where she rips her arms off trying to like open this tank up where the thing wasn't even there.
Right.
Like the whole thing looked really cool.
Right.
But it really made no sense at all for the character's actions.
There's better ways to go that way. I mean, let's go to the Matrix, right? Like, she's like, you can get out of the car right now, but you've been down that road before. You know exactly where it ends, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so he's going to stay in the car because like if he does that, he's going to have like a new adventure, right? He's not going to become like a totally different thing, but he's going to have a new adventure. That's more believable, right? Or the red pill, blue pill thing. That's another good way of presenting that crossroads moment. But to me, like having her body get hijacked by hacker intelligence entity, and his only way of getting her to go along with it is to be like, well, aren't you kind of bored with what you were? Like, and she's like, yeah, that sounds cool.
There's a subtle implication too. She can never have a child of her own. So this is her way of having a child. That was like thrown in at the end. There was never it was very,
I think I might have missed that too. I think it's just bad writing. That's what I thought it was.
It's tough to tell if it's bad writing or if it's the English dub.
Well, that's a whole.
Yeah, but the English dub still has to stay fairly true to what the intent was of the character dialogue.
Yeah, well, I don't. As somebody who watched a lot of 1990s anime, maybe like you were saying, Mike, I'm just used to that.
Yeah,
kind of like fill it. It's like a cipher. Like I just fill in the blanks of what I want to see.
Yeah,
I did see a bored character, like even in that first scene where she's like, or they're diving backwards to go into that action moment. That's such a boring way to do it. Like, it's a cool way, but it's such a non-plus sort of like, okay, fine, I'm going to drop backwards into this thing and fine, whatever. I'll just shoot it out as I go. Like the character always seemed bored to me.
Yeah.
Despite being titillated by their body's shape when I was 16. I mean, I still am, but at the same time, like, I guess that's, if I'm going to be the stand for it, I guess that's the interesting thing is like this character has unlimited possibilities. They could use, I forget what they call it. It's not the internet. They could use computers everywhere, I think is the English dub, as they get plugged into the ports. In the Matrix, they have ports on the back of their neck.
Yep.
Many of them do.
Yep.
right? They could do anything, and they're just so bored of always winning, or they're so bored of like mastering the physical world that they want something else.
Yeah.
So I appreciated the like, what is consciousness? What does it mean to be a human being sort of dialogue? And it gets back to like every cyborg movie we've watched, right? Going back to, what was the first one? She stabs him in the end.
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, yeah.
Right? Like, it's the cyborg movies we pick are always about, what does it mean to exist?
Right.
Just by happenstance, apparently.
Yeah.
And this one was, partly because of anime, but it also happens to be that. So I was here for that, and I thought it was cool. Like, a lot of the characters are augmented. And so a lot of the conversation was like, how much are they augmented? Are they still a human?
Yeah.
What are we up against here?
Right.
Sort of thing. So much so that the one guy typing near the end, like, he puts his fingers on the keyboard.
They all
each finger
expand.
expands.
Yeah.
It's like 3 more fingers.
Right.
Well, my question about, like, I'm talking to my daughters are watching it, I'm like,
Don't reality this thing.
but
here.
I'm
No,
like,
just
do you really need keyboards if you could just plug something into the back of your neck and you're connected to it? Like, what the hell's the point of being able to do that?
That's because they didn't understand the possibility of the technology.
I guess, but it's just, I thought it was like an aesthetic choice. It just looks cool
Probably
to have
aesthetic
fingers.
choice,
And I totally misread that moment too. I'm such a noob to like this movie and this genre that when that happened, I was like, oh fuck. I'm like, he's like a machine, like and they don't know. And then it was like, oh no, they know, and they're all like that, and they're like, they're just standing there having a But I did think all that stuff was cool. I mean, there's that old philosophical question of like, you have a car and you replace a tire and you replace another tire and you have it for so many years. At a certain point, if you've replaced every part, it's become a new car. But when did it become that new car? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fascinating question. And like I said, the philosophy and the themes in this movie I thought were great. And in addition to the other things that, I named before, I just, like I said, I just thought some of the writing was not that good.
My final take, I think, on it is that it's a very interesting high concept piece.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love subtlety. I'm all about subtlety in literature and storytelling. This was a little too subtle. And I think there could have been a little bit more directness. And again, that might be an issue with translation, I guess. But I just feel like the story itself just needed just a little bit more to sell the ideas that they were trying to sell, just to get the character where they needed to be, or the characters where they needed to be. Again, the concept was interesting.
Or it could be the audience of origin, right? Like,
Maybe.
American audiences expect certain things, even in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, God, that was over 30 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Did that blow your mind?
Yes, it does fuck with me a little.
29 years ago, I think this movie came out, right?
Yeah.
No, 30 years.
95. So
30 years.
just about, 30 years, because it's 2025 as of this recording. So yeah, no, that does fuck with me firstly, but I also think about that, what does an American audience expect versus like, what does a Japanese audience expect, or like an Indian if you're watching Bollywood or something?
Well, and they are very different aesthetics. I've not watched a lot of anime, as I said before, but I've watched a ton of, like kung fu movies, and I'm a sucker for all the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Hero and all those movies. I love that shit. But it is, to the uninitiated, a very different aesthetic. Like you were talking about like the weird vocals, Shaun, before on like the introductory thing, but that's not uncommon, and like, you know what I'm saying? And
I mean, that's a lot of samurai.
right. Exactly. You go back to like the old Akira, I was trying to watch within the past couple of years, the Akira Kurosawa movie, which is, I think it's called Hidden Fortress or something like that. It's like I think it's like based on Macbeth, and it's also a motivation for Star Wars, or like an inspiration for Star Wars or whatever. And, but there's so much in that you watch that you're like, well, aesthetically, that's like, that would never hold up in Western cinema. You and I recently watched Yojimbo is another one. Yeah, exactly. And it's another one where it's just like, there's stuff there that does hold up in Western cinema, but there's all this other stuff that you like, no, that's a very Asian aesthetic. It's a very Eastern aesthetic. And, I don't know. That's part of it too, is like, how familiar are you with the tropes and the aesthetics and stuff?
I will be interested, Mike, to see your take on Cowboy Bebop, which is, I suggested because it's noir,
right?
But it's also anime, and it's widely credited to have the best soundtrack that's ever existed for an anime. So I'm setting the bar way up there.
Yes, you are. Yeah, I'm super interested.
But I remember watching Cowboy Bebop as a kid and then going on Kazaa
Wow.
and stealing the soundtrack to it. So I
Really?
could listen to it.
That's awesome.
I have it somewhere on my MP3 player that died while I was trying to tan in the sun.
I can't wait. I'm actually excited about this one.
Well, shit, I hope I didn't screw it up. But I love, like, I've already started rewatching. I'm like 3 episodes in, and it builds, firstly. But secondly, I forgot, like, how much of a banger that opening song is. Like, the intro song has no right to be that good.
Okay.
So.
Oh, man,
I'm
in for that.
I'm gonna make this point too. My daughter, who's a big time Japanese cultural aficionado, like listens to the music, Vocaloids, and she's learning Japanese, all this crazy stuff, loves it. Gave me the side eye throughout this whole movie because I thought she'd like to see this too, and she's just like, this is not. She didn't quite care for it, but she's stoked to watch Cowboy Bebop because I told her that's on our radar. So she's like, I want to watch that with you. Mark me down, so I know that's something that has some cachet still. So.
Speaking from complete naivete on this, is that also like a Japanese studio that does that, or is that like an American studio? Or
look, I'm not sure.
Because there's like anime, and then there's like American anime, which is like very much like Afro Samurai. Or a couple years ago, do you remember the old Nintendo game Castlevania? They made it was on Netflix, and I just ended up watching it randomly a few years ago at night, and it was like an anime version of that, but it was like an American studio that did it. And they do it very much for a Western audience. Like it's the style of animation, but it's an aesthetic that's built for like an American audience.
It was absolutely a Japanese production.
Cowboy Bebop?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Now that I think about it, the theme song, even on the ones that aired on Cartoon Network, which were English dubbed, the theme song is in Japanese with subtitles.
Nice. All right.
So yeah, and it's top rated TV. It's number 42 out of 250 on IMDb.
All right.
So,
have you seen it before, Shaun?
No, I know of it. I've just never watched it. So I'm looking forward to it.
So just to be clear to your audience, we're watching the TV show, which aired from 98 to 99. They're 24-minute episodes each. So, book out your time. I was telling Mike that the series builds. So, of course, now I'm on the hook for it actually being good. But if nothing else, make sure to watch the first 3 episodes and the last 4. If you can only book out 3.5 hours, I guess.
Yeah.
If you can book out, Lord of the Rings time, do that, because those are the 6 that really connect.
Shaun will have the whole series watched by next week.
I don't know how you do it.
I can't.
Shaun,
that's too fast.
Shaun is not only the completionist on the podcast, but he's also the procrastinator. I didn't say that right.
When it's something I want to do, I'll do it.
That's right.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, I want to do all of the things that we agree to, but I still procrastinate.
Yeah.
For sure.
I've been that way my whole life, though. I'll turn the paper in and I'll get the A on it, but I did it the night before.
Says every English
right.
major.
I hit print 20 minutes before the class started.
Yeah, you pray the printer doesn't jam, or that you still have pages left on your account. Yep, I know those days.
I was just thinking, we're recording this during the last regular season game of the season, watching the Bills in the background. Mm-hmm. And
right now.
Well, I mean, it's still 8 minutes to go.
8.5 minutes to go.
I gotta say,
put Josh in for a series.
Yeah. Our listeners might be listening to this as we're about ready to roll into the Super Bowl. So, I mean,
yeah.
Oh, that's if you just fucked us over, my friend.
Or not.
No. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not that superstitious.
If you believe in infinite universes, so many roads just branched off of Shaun's comment right now.
Which would are we?
What are they going to be? What will have happened by the time our listeners are going to be like, they got eliminated in the first game by fucking Denver?
Oh, Lord, let's hope not.
Oh, my God. I don't want to live in that earth. No, thanks.
If we talk, so we're doing Cowboy Bebop. We talked about another reading piece that we're going to do?
We have not on air, but Mike has been texting around.
True.
And he made a suggestion that I'm down for if y'all want to do it and sign up so we get people time to pick up the book.
Which one was that again?
Yeah, so we're not 100 listeners. We're not 100% committed to this yet. It was just a title that had got thrown out there. But the book is called 36 Streets. It's within the last couple of years it came out, and it's sort of like a cyberpunk book that's been described as Richard K. Morgan. Is that the author's name? Who is the guy who wrote Altered Carbon?
Carbon, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like that author meets
That's it.
Shoot, Wind Up Bird meets Apocalypse Now,
Yeah.
right? Those are the three titles. And the premise, as I understand it, again, just from having read a couple of reviews, is that it takes place in like an alternate universe Vietnam that is controlled by, or it might be Korea, that's controlled by China. And there's a sort of like simulation game that people play that is based on the Vietnam War. And that's really all I know about it.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think.
Oh, and the main character is a girl who is also a gangster. She's like in an organized crime family or something. So there was just a lot of buzzwords in there that got my attention anyway.
Yeah. The algorithm has worked for us.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Trust the robot overlords.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if they look like the Major.
Damn, dude.
Yeah. Well, I got to bring it back around one more. So. All right. Thank you, listener, for spending your time with us. That is it for now, but make sure to get your hands on 36 Streets and start watching Cowboy Bebop. Like I said, the first three, the last three, give yourself lots of time. It's not too long, but, especially if you can get it streaming because there's no commercials. So, hey, it's 26 minutes instead of half an hour. But until then, cheers, yo.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, I know it's past the holiday season, but if anybody's looking for some books, because you're here for books anyways, right? We've got a bookshop.org affiliate link. Do a little good for the cast, do a little good for bookshop.org, and they source all of those books from your local bookshop. So you do have to tell them where you're about, and then they will fulfill your order locally, which is awesome.
Shop local.
Shop local, that's right. Thanks to Mike for turning me on to bookshop.org. Link will be in the show notes if anybody wants to help the cast out a little bit, as well as get your literature on.
And if you don't specify the bookstore or anything like that, they still, the money the profit goes into a pool, which is donated back to indie bookstores in general. So either way, a good cause.
Yeah. Yeah. You had pointed out the last time we had mentioned bookshop.org that there's a ticker at the top and it's millions of dollars donated to local bookstores. So
that's right.
I love it.
Instead of to Jeff Bezos' space shuttle, which I think is, the better cause.
That's what we call him. I dare not say his name.
The Wiener Rocket Mobile?
The Wiener Rocket Mobile with a cowboy hat on top. Yeah. You know what? Because it doesn't hurt the album, or our algorithm at all. I'm going to pull a Shaun here. Fuck you, Jeff Bezos. Fuck you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wait.
Oh, thank you.
Bell around here
I
somewhere.
appreciate that. That's bookshop.org. Link will be in the show notes. We get a small cut of that sale. So, it helps us out as we can maintain our casting.
Yeah, buy higher quality sake. And,
yeah. Not Fuck Yi, but Fuck Me.
Fuck you up.
It'll fuck you up. There, cut out the first joke. Leave the second, please.
Got it.
Appreciate it.